Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Wednesday, December 9th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The game against Michigan is in 353 days. That number was at 4 yesterday. Then Michigan announced they would not be able to play this weekend due to a COVID-19 outbreak. If you're listening to this, you've probably heard that news already. But that was just one piece of news. On an incredibly busy Tuesday, Buckeye Scoop's beat reporter Tony Gerdeman joins me this morning to try and make sense of it all. Tony, we were on a Zoom interview with OSU linebacker Justin Hilliard when that story broke, and it was not real hard to see how tough that news was for him and probably a whole lot of other people in that building.
Yeah, it was not the news that anybody wanted to hear. And talking to people, and Coach Day and Kerry Combs and Justin Fields before the announcement, when you would bring this subject up, they would be like, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to think about that. We're playing the game. And that's what we're focused on. And then Justin Hilliard is up there when the news breaks. And I asked him for his thoughts. And I had somebody on Twitter mad at me that I broke the news to him and that I didn't just let him find out from the team. And and that I had no heart in doing it. But I went back and listened, what did I actually say? And I was like, I hate to say there. I hate to bring this up or hate to mention this, something about I hate doing this, basically, because I did totally hate doing this to Justin Hilliard. But the game has been canceled. What are your thoughts? And he was like, what game? And the game. And it wasn't registering, and it didn't want to register, and said that he hasn't heard anything like that from the team, and until he hears it from the team, he won't believe it. And then it was confirmed again by others, and you could just see it in his eyes and just his demeanor without even saying a word, just leaving his face, the excitement of what this week is. And Ohio State released their trailer for the game, and there's several clips in there of Justin Hilliard, getting the team fired up and doing what they do every day for this one game. And then to have it taken away a few days beforehand, knowing that it was a possibility, but not giving into that possibility and just continuing to fight as they have done throughout this entire ordeal. And then to see him lose the opportunity to play this game, it was rough. And I'm sure he wasn't alone. And this was a tough message to give for the coaches. But as Ryan Day said, he's just getting tired of the disappointment. And that was before he even knew the game was canceled. And so I'm sure it's been a rough day. It was a rough day for the entire team, the coaches. And then I don't know, is it like a game where you win a game and you celebrate for one day and then you move on? And now they're in the move on stage and trying to figure out what's next.
Yeah, and that is the next question is, okay, moving on to whom or to what? And I mean, you and I tag teamed a story about a bunch of potential Ohio State opponents that they could end up facing this weekend. We went through basically every Big Ten team they have not played yet this year. And Purdue had canceled its practice on Tuesday, so we landed on they can play Indiana again. That'll be great. And then Tuesday night, Indiana shut down their program temporarily as well. So now both Purdue and Indiana are shut down. So that's suddenly not looking super fantastic. So I guess, are we all just back to kind of shrugging right now as far as what's going to happen this weekend?
Well, I'm sure Gene Smith is trying to make calls or is making calls and seeing how receptive other teams would be. But the Big Ten would also have to get involved, because now you're talking about moving multiple teams instead of just one team, unless sometime today a team shuts down and then they have their opponent as an open week and is looking for an opponent. Although you wonder, would they agree to play Ohio State, or would they also be like, you know what, we're going to rest up before championship week, because we've got some COVID issues of our own. That would be best if we can just relax and get everybody healthy. And you can't tell them, you can't say you're ducking somebody. It's like, well, everybody is having issues at this point, and a week off may help them become a better, more full team. But I don't know what is next. Do you make calls? You say, would you like to play? Can you maybe move some things around? And if teams are telling them no, which kind of sounds like they are, then does the Big Ten get involved? And would the Big Ten get involved? Or Would they just, you know what? It's too hard to move stuff. Nobody's willing to do it. This is an all for one for all conference where if one person isn't happy, then the other 13 have to agree with them. That's why there were no fans in the stands, because some states didn't allow it, some cities didn't allow it. So then it was outlawed for everybody because it wouldn't be fair for the schools who could. And if nobody wants to play, you don't play anybody, and then you just change the rule that you don't need 5, you don't need 6 games, 6 wins or whatever. 5 games is enough, and you just change that time, that long-standing rule of having to play at least 6 games to make the Big Ten title game.
I remember when Moses came down Mount Delaney with those 2 tablets carved with the rules about 6 game minimum. That was I don't know, 2,000 years ago, something like that. It's been a minute.
The first commandment: Thou shalt not play out of conference.
Thou shalt not UT Chattanooga. Yeah, that's I mean, that's kind of going to be an interesting question. If no one from the Big Ten can play this week, and Ohio State just wants to get another game. I mean, this is a point that our Buckeye Scoop's Ross Fulton made on Twitter last night. It's not that they necessarily need another data point for the College Football Playoff Committee. It's they need another game worth of reps to get up to speed. I mean, you've got a lot of teams that have played 10, 11 games already. If if you're entering college football playoffs with, 5, 6 games, like you're at a little bit of a disadvantage at that point. So they want to get another game worth of reps in there. So Michigan AD Ward Manuel floated the idea that if the Buckeyes are not in the Big Ten title game, which, I mean, I would assume they're going to be in there, especially if Indiana is having COVID issues right now. But if they're not in the Big Ten title game, they could potentially play the Michigan game on December 19th. Then, of course, he quickly added that he felt Ohio State should be allowed to play in the title game. So that may not happen. That would give the Wolverines a chance to get healthy again, at least if they did play on the 19th. I don't know how likely it is, but if Ohio State's not in the Big Ten title game, I mean, I think I would take Ohio State and Michigan a week late. That's fine.
Really? You wouldn't want to play a team from the West just for some random reason? You'd rather play Michigan? That's okay, but this is a traditional Champions Week thing where the East plays the West. The East doesn't play the East in Champions Week. They never have. I don't think they should. But no, I'm with you. If there's any way this game can happen, go ahead and make it happen. Unfortunately, I don't know that you can guarantee, because the numbers that people were talking about was that Michigan was like severely down players, and how many would they need to get back before they felt comfortable playing? Who knows? But 2 weeks without playing, you lose a week, and then maybe they are good to go. And with another week off, you would think that they should be able to. I just wonder if you can operate that way, and it's not a sure thing. And then, as we've talked about on Buckeye Weekly, you have television partners as well, and would Fox be okay taking the gamble of maybe getting that Michigan game? Maybe they would, as opposed to the whatever alternative programming they would have involving Indiana against Northwestern at noon on a Saturday.
Well, and will Indiana even be able to play? I mean, you look at every team in the Big Ten that has had a COVID issue and had to cancel a game. Every team except for Ohio State that has missed one game has also missed a second game. So that's Maryland, that's Wisconsin, that's Michigan. I mean, that the only one that has done it and come back. Minnesota had one as well, missed 2 games. The only team that has done it in 1 week is Ohio State, and they came back severely shorthanded and are probably a little more motivated to make it happen that second week than a lot of teams are. But, if Indiana ends up missing this week, there's a pretty good chance Indiana ends up missing next week too. And that means that either the Big Ten has to change its rule on the minimum number of games, or the team that will go will be a 2-4 Michigan State or a 2-4 Michigan. Those are the next teams in line. If the top 3 Big Ten East teams are all ineligible, I'm sure Fox would love that. Last night, speaking of fantastic TV, last night was also the college football playoff rankings release. The top 6 all stayed the same: Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, the Buckeyes, then Texas A&M, Florida. It's almost like these people don't actually have to fly to a hotel and sit in a boardroom because nothing has changed since day one. Alabama alum Reese Davis had quite a hashtag take on the ESPN broadcast about those college football rankings. He had some thoughts on what should happen if Clemson beats Notre Dame, Florida beats Alabama. Tony, we all know that people love getting mad, so go ahead and give them a little fuel for their anger this morning.
So, yeah, this has been a scenario that should concern some Ohio State fans, and it would be Florida beating Alabama in the SEC championship game and Clemson beating Notre Dame in the ACC championship game and possibly freezing out Ohio State. And one of the things Reese Davis said during this reveal show is, with Ohio State not playing this week and only being 6-0 and not having this big, picture of games, that you can't keep giving Ohio State everything. You can't give them everything, I think was his direct quote about getting them into playoffs and keeping them at number 4. And the idea that you would give Ohio State everything by getting them into playoffs at 6-0, and you would somehow be taking something away from an Alabama that loses or a Notre Dame that loses is laughable to me, because giving everything to somebody would be like letting them into the playoffs after they lose the conference championship game. They would be giving everything. How often has Alabama gotten the benefit of the doubt by the committee? Every single year. There's a reason. There's several reasons why they have they've been ranked number 1 more than any other team in the playoff era. And one, it's because they've always had the most talent. 2, it's because they get the benefit of every single doubt and have for a very long time under Nick Saban. And if Notre Dame loses, then you'd be giving them the benefit of the doubt and putting them into the playoffs, when we have seen what happens when Notre Dame is in the playoffs. And so the idea that Ohio State is getting everything is laughable to me. It's typical. It's something that you could just count on somebody from ESPN saying something that will perk up your ears. And then he also, when dismissing Ohio State or saying you can't give them everything, he also said, remember what happened in 2017 and 2018 in Ohio State's regular season, and referencing, of course, the losses to Purdue and Iowa during the regular season, and apparently inferring that if Ohio State would play 3 or 4 more games, they would have one of those losses in there. And so, yeah, that was the enjoyable part of the evening, having that spewed on television, when there was also, Tom, no mention of Notre Dame's 2017 or 2018 or the blowouts that they have taken part in those years or in years prior or in years to come, frankly.
Notre Dame's literally any year in the last 27 years that they've been in a major bowl game. Yes, that's the data points that we focus on in our answer. It's always such a fascinating exercise. You were on the conference call after that show with committee chairman Gary Barta. When coming away from that conversation with Gary Barta, how important do you think it is for Ohio State to play someone this weekend? How big is it for them to just add another game, add another 2 games here?
It's important, because the thing that Barta has said the last 2 weeks, and maybe even beyond that, certainly the last 2 weeks, is how difficult it is for the committee to compare teams who have 5 games compared to 9 games. I think Notre Dame has 10 games right now. Ohio State has 5. And so it's difficult to just basically, when you're comparing Texas A&M and Ohio State, you've seen more of Texas A&M. You have a better idea. I also think maybe you can forgive more when you've seen more, and certainly there's plenty to hold Texas A&M accountable for with the bad offense, and so. But what Gary Barta did say is that, yes, it is tough to determine where these teams should be. And then he was asked, well, next week, if Ohio State doesn't play, how do you think that will go? And every time somebody asks, well, what about next week? It's always, we don't project. There are no hypotheticals here. All we can tell you is right now, with Ohio State's body of work, they were deemed better than Texas A&M. Last week, it sure seemed like they were closer than he mentioned they were this week. But when that was brought up to him, he said, "Well, I don't remember there being any measuring, stick between the two." But certainly, this game helped Ohio State. Another game with a performance like that would help them more. At some point, it has felt like at some point, if Ohio State doesn't get a fifth, sixth, seventh game, that they were going to be left behind because they've been harping on this, the difficulty in telling how good you are if you don't have enough games played, which is why, and I'm still trying to get my question asked of, how do you make sure you're not penalizing teams who are being maybe a little extra cautious with COVID during a pandemic, mind you? How do you make sure you're not penalizing those programs for maybe canceling a game or having a game canceled? And I don't know that there's a real good answer if they were to leave a team out in that regard, because yes, the body of work is lesser, but it is lesser because those programs are trying to be cautious during a pandemic.
Well, and there's also an interesting point to be made, which is if your team has the COVID outbreak, you can at least sort of, we can get into whether this is victim blaming or not, but you can at least sort of say, well, at least, this was your program had the issue. This is two of three, Ohio State's three missed games, assuming there is a missed game this weekend, would be because the other team got COVID. So, it's a victim adjacent blaming, which is
worse. I don't know.
That seems like something that people might have some takes on if that happens. If Ohio State wins every game it plays, whether it's one or two more, you look at Texas A&M. Texas A&M is fifth. Texas A&M is not playing this weekend. Their game against Ole Miss got canceled because of issues for Ole Miss. So it's not like Texas A&M can add to their resume this weekend. And then they finish with Tennessee, who is just a steaming pile of garbage. So, I'm not sure what they could do against Tennessee to be, really, really bolster their resume. So if Ohio State wins, one or two more games and they win however many games they play, it seems like they should finish ahead of Texas A&M almost regardless. I think the bigger question is if Clemson just barely beats Notre Dame and Florida beats Alabama, then what? And that's the Reese Davis scenario. So if Ohio State wins every game it plays, whether it's one or two more, how likely is it that they do get left out?
It would be. I don't like the scenario because it is very difficult. But the idea that two teams would lose their way into the playoffs, to me, is outrageous. You should have to win to get in, and then to have. It's one thing if one team loses and gets in because there aren't there aren't five great teams. There are only four. So yeah, you keep Alabama or Notre Dame, but to keep two teams that lost their way into the playoffs, it's like, well, why even have the season? It's just become an invitational, which it already halfway is anyway. When we're talking about, look at the way that the rankings have been forever, and Alabama and Clemson are going to be there. It's just who's going to join them. And then if you just allow those two teams, you allow Alabama to get in, having lost the SEC championship, I can totally see that just because of how the committee loves Alabama, and a loss to a top 5, top 6 SEC team is not a loss. It's a good win. We all know that. And so this would just be another quality win for Alabama. I don't even know if they would drop out of the top spot.
How many wins does Ohio State have against SEC teams this year? I rest my case.
Thank you.
Now, here's an interesting one. They could theoretically get an SEC win this weekend if they did somehow figure out a way to play Texas A&M. So let's just for a moment set aside the Big Ten's rule that Moses brought down from Mount Delaney with the no out-of-conference games. Set it aside. What should Ohio State do this weekend? If let's just say Indiana and Purdue are the only other Big Ten teams to cancel, so they're both out. Neither of them are available. There's no other Big Ten team available. So what does Ohio State do? Who would you have Ohio State play this weekend if it was up to you?
If it was up to me, I would probably Like, we would all love to see Ohio State, Texas A&M. But if Ohio State has a Big Ten title, they don't. That comparison with Texas A&M goes away, because they will have that extra data point over Texas A&M. So there wouldn't, any comparison between the two would then basically go Ohio State's way. But if Florida wins the SEC championship, maybe having that win over the Texas A&M for the Buckeyes would help, because that would be something that Florida didn't have. But in reality, I guess I would say maybe Maryland, because it's an opponent that will test the secondary. It's an opponent that you should beat, and you're taking a game away from Rutgers. That's fine. They've already played 7. They don't need any more. They've done enough. They can take a week off before they play whomever in the Champions Week. But I think Maryland would be a good opponent, an opportunity to see where the secondary is, to get some looks. But I have no doubt Ohio State would play Texas A&M if it was possible. I don't know that Texas A&M would do the same.
Yeah, that would be quite a challenge to get that game scheduled and get the logistics all worked up, to get the equipment truck up to Columbus and get the whole thing set up and scheduled. And that's a fairly high risk, low reward venture for Ohio State. Outside of the one scenario we laid out before, there's no real danger that Ohio State misses the playoff. So, and there are those who will tell you that there's no danger that Ohio State misses the playoff, period, if they win out. So there's a little bit of risk there for not potentially a whole lot of reward, but it would be a lot of fun. I would really love to cover an Ohio State Texas A&M game this week, but at this point, I would love to cover any Ohio State game this weekend. That would be great. And boy, we're 3 days away from an Ohio State game, and well, probably, and we don't know who they're going to be playing, or if they're going to be playing. I feel like I have said this 1,000 times this fall, but man, this is going to be an interesting week. It is. This is just in a year full of, wow, this is going to be a crazy, interesting week that you're going to remember for a long time. Like, this is going to be, this is potentially the first time Ohio State will not play Michigan since 1917. Friends, we are living out history right now. And what a fascinating time to be living in, and what a great time to be a member of BuckeyeScoop.com, because, man, there is a lot of information flying on that Ask the Insiders board this week. There's a 5-star wide receiver commitment who's set to announce his decision pretty soon, Emeka Egbuka. He will decide probably between Ohio State and Oklahoma. Our insiders have been burning up the phone lines and working to figure out where he's going to be headed. That's big news that's coming soon. And hey, is there going to be an Ohio State-Michigan game maybe at some point? Is Ohio State going to get into the Big Ten championship game? Are they going to play a game this week? Are they going to make it to the college football playoff? This is all stuff that's going to happen in the next week and a half. It is crazy. December 20th is the college football selection show. It's less than 2 weeks away. This is going to be bananas the next couple of weeks. You are going to want to be at BuckeyeScoop.com to be a member for all of the insanity, all of, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be fascinating to watch. So you should sign up today at BuckeyeScoop.com. Just go ahead and tell your spouse, significant other, kids, parents, whatever, just start my membership right now for Christmas. It's fine. I don't need anything else. Just give me that. I want to know what's happening, because this is, boy, I sure hope this is a once in a lifetime season. I think it is going to, I think it's going to be. I'm an optimist. I think it's going to be, but this is one for the history books. So make sure you are living history at BuckeyeScoop.com. Also, make sure you check out all of our podcasts. Tony and I have been doing a daily Buckeye Weekly podcast this week for the Michigan game. There's no Michigan game this week, but there's been enough news stuff that we're probably just going to keep doing that. So you can check that out, as well as all of our other great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe right there. Also, leave us a 5-star rating and review while you're at it. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. I don't know what the heck's going to be happening when I'm talking to you tomorrow, but it's going to be real interesting. So I will talk to you then.